So this is a really good way to practice and actually, kind of have the experience and develop the attitude of it. So what we'd like to do is actually bring up some candidates to the front here. And we're going to be doing 2 groups. So the first group that we drew was Owen, Rochelle, Andy, Pranav, and Buffy. So that'll be our first group. And let me bring the microphones. Test.
Turn the projector off.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Although you might want to go over this first.
Okay. Yeah, let me just go over. So this is, I'll do a little introduction of how we do an empathy circle. So in this process, the first person is going to select who they're going to speak to. So if I would speak to Owen, I would speak to him, and then Owen would reflect back what I'm saying to my satisfaction. And then we keep going like that for the time allotted. And then once I feel heard or our time is up, it would be the listener's turn to speak. And then they would select someone to speak to, and then we just keep going around like that for the time allotted. And the next slide, if we, oh yeah. So some tips is, as the speaker, you want to pause often and to give the listener a chance to reflect what they've heard. And when you're done speaking, you can say something like, I feel fully heard. And if you're the active listener, in your own words, you're just wanting to reflect back what it is you're hearing, kind of the essence of what they're saying. And you want to refrain from asking questions, judging, analyzing. But then when it's your turn to speak, you can say anything you want. You can be as abusive as you want. So and that person will reflect back your abuse until you feel heard. Then the silent listeners, people who aren't speaking, then they will eventually, you'll get a turn. So we can turn the screen off so we don't blind Owen. So we want to start with, let's see.
So we're going to be taking 3-minute turns.
Yeah, so we're going to be taking 3-minute turns.
And I'll be chiming. And when your time's up, I'll do this, so you'll know. And I'll be giving that signal a little bit before the 3 minutes, so you can wrap up, and the person who's listening to you has a chance to reflect what they're hearing. Okay?
And so Lou is going to be sort of a co-facilitator, so I'm going to be part of the circle. And Lou is going to be keeping time. And at 2 minutes and 30 seconds, ring the bell, and he'll be keeping time. And at 2 minutes 30, you kind of wrap up, and so that the listener can reflect, give the last reflection.
And
Yeah.
And the person who's the active listener shouldn't ask any questions?
No questions.
Your job is just to reflect back what you're hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, so 3 minutes is a long time to listen without reflecting. So normally that isn't the case. So normally the speaker speaks for maybe 30 seconds or a minute, their first little piece, and then you pause so that the reflector can reflect it back, because it's very hard to hold on to 3 minutes of stuff. And so it's really okay, actually, for the listener to say, hold on, can you wait a minute? And if people have trouble doing that, Edwin or I might say that, ask the speaker to hold on. Sometimes the listeners have trouble saying, could you wait a minute, I want to reflect back what you've said so far. But as a listener, that's totally okay to do that.
Do we have a mic?
Correct.
And you can also, if you're the listener, and it becomes a lot, like the person's going on, and I say, let me just reflect back what I'm hearing so far, because you kind of you hear, yeah, just so you don't have too much to. Okay, is that one working? Ooh, a little. Okay. Take the volume down. That's okay, great. So what else do we have to cover? Like I said, Lou's co-facilitating. So our question is, how might we build a more empathic culture, a more empathic and caring culture? And So that's pretty much it. The best way is just to start doing it, then we can model it. So if you'd like to start, and you can speak to me. So this is an example. It's best just to kind of do it, and I'll reflect back what I'm hearing.
Sure. So I think some ideas that come to mind right away are the two parties.
Sorry.
Sure.
We wanted to introduce ourselves. Sorry.
No worries.
So we want to do just short introductions, like our name, where we're from, and how you're feeling right now. So I'm Edwin, and I'll model it. I'm Edwin Rutsch. I'm from El Cerrito, and I'm feeling a little frazzled. There's a lot of balls in the air, so I feel a little frazzled.
So I'm Pranav Jandhyala. I'm from Cupertino, California, and I'm a student here at Berkeley, and I'm feeling pretty excited, pretty good in general.
Okay.
I'm Owen Poindexter. I live in South Berkeley, and I'm feeling very curious.
Rochelle Pardue-Okimoto. I also live in El Cerrito, and I am feeling very calm.
I'm Buffy Wicks. I live in Oakland, and I'm excited to try this.
Hi, I'm Andy Katz. I live in Berkeley, and I'm feeling very interested.
Okay, great.
So the question is, how do we build a more caring culture?
I'm more empathic and caring culture.
So I think the first idea that comes to mind is stepping out of the two-party system framework and really orienting ourselves towards the truth. Because when we together address problems from the perspective of problem solver, then we can actually step out of those individual roles, step out of these preconceived notions, and actually look at empirical data, look at facts and reasoning, listen to the other side and the other side's arguments, and really just come to a conclusion that we can both agree upon.
Okay, so what I'm hearing there is that you want to get away from it.
Okay.
So you're saying that there's a sort of a two-party system, and you want to get away from that polarization and really address problems together in a sort of more of a problem-solving way.
Yeah.
And that's one way to build a culture of empathy. Is there more?
So I think that the model of this conversation itself is one of the possible solutions. I was reading one of Jordan Peterson's works, the other day, and he talks about having conversations in which we reflect back, exactly what we're doing right now, what the other person has said, to the point that the other person is completely comfortable with the other person's analysis of their arguments and reasoning, or we even reflect back better, the arguments, so that we're both on the same page about what we believe, and then we can move forward and actually talk about our disagreements. I think that in theory, it seems really easy. Any two people can come together and have a conversation, but based on my experience, I found that it's a lot harder. Through
reflect what I'm hearing. What I'm hearing is that you're a fan of Jordan Peterson, and he actually talks about doing this type of dialogue where one person speaks, the other person reflects until they feel heard. So, and you see this process that we're doing as actually a way of fostering this culture of empathy. So what we're doing is building that culture of empathy.
Exactly. Yes.
Is there more?
So I do think that, again, stepping outside our preconceived notions is important, unless we're constantly willing to challenge our preconceived notions.
That's 30-second warning. So.
Okay. Then we won't be able to orient ourselves towards the truth. Some of my most important...
So 30 at 30 with the ding is kind of you just have to wrap up. So
okay.
Get the last reflection.
Yeah, so this is the last kind of point I have. So some of my biggest learning moments as a student has been, when I found something or an argument that actually completely made me change my mind, on some specific issue or some specific, theory. So it's at that point when, I am... kind of in this moment of realization when I kind of realize that everything I thought before, seems wrong, and I'm actually willing to open myself up to new ideas.
Okay, so when you had a lot of meaning when you really were able to open yourself up to new ideas, and that was really important to you, is what I'm hearing. So, okay, so then it's my turn. I'm going to speak across to Andy.
Okay, so, and hold on just a second. So I want to make just a clarifying statement about the time. So when you hear the time cue, finish up whatever thought you're having, a sentence or two, and then let the person reflect it back. Okay?
Okay.
And I'm only saying that because we're kind of on a tight schedule. We have 2 circles we're doing. We want to make sure we have time for both.
We do that one.
What?
When do we, at the 30-second?
Yeah. When you hear the ding, just finish up what you're saying.
Sure, thank you.
Okay, so for how to build a culture of empathy, I've been working on this for about 15 years, and my family is evangelical Christian fundamentalists. They live in the Central Valley, and I found that doing these empathy circles in the family between myself, who's a progressive, and them as conservative, actually works. And my mother says, it's so nice when we get together and everybody's peaceful. So I think what we're doing is one of the great tools for that.
So should I reflect
Yeah,
back
just
what I'm hearing?
reflect the essence of what you hear me say.
Yeah, what I've heard you say is that it's a wonderful way to tap into empathy and to gain empathy for those in your family by being able to listen and engage and learn from other people's perspectives. And that you've been able to learn a lot from your family members by engaging in that, despite that you have different views and come from different places.
Yeah, exactly. So this basic process, even though it seems kind of simple, it can be, as a first step, it can be very, very effective. And it's the exact same process we did with the political right and left in the empathy tent. The battles of Berkeley, bringing the 2 sides together. We just get them to listen to each other. And so it's just I find it very effective and want to kind of spread it.
It sounds like you've had even more success locally, and that with the project, with the empathy tent, that you've been able to actually accomplish bridging the gap between people from left views and right views within the empathy tent.
Yeah, and what I'm hoping is that whoever wins this can take it to Sacramento. We can have empathy circles in the Capitol, and beyond.
I think we need more of that in our culture. We need to. Should I still be reflecting?
Yeah, just reflecting.
It's you sound very hopeful that one of us. There's a number of us, but that one of us could build more empathy in our leadership in Sacramento.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you. So you can select who you'd like to speak to, and they'll reflect back.
Sure. I think I would like to speak with. I want to speak with all of you.
Won't be offended.
Yeah. I think I'll just go left through right. So I'll speak because we can just trade the mic back and forth.
Sure. Hi, Andy.
Hi, Buffy. So this format is a little interesting for me, so I'm actually struggling with how to begin this conversation right now.
So you're struggling on how to begin the conversation.
That's right. I am. We're so in these forums, we're so used to being required to cram in very complex issues like how to get single-payer health care, how to have more affordable housing, environmental protection, how to do all of these things, and to do it in just 1 minute. Solve all of our problems in 1 minute bits. And here we have this openness I almost don't know what to do with my brain.
So what I'm hearing you say is that our normal formats are very formulaic, and this is a new, different type of format, and you're having a hard time figuring out how to deal with it, right?
Yeah, in part, but particularly I'm so eager to get into the issues that we all care about. Why are we running in this race? But I think this is a great opportunity to bridge our issues that bring us to run, and thinking about how do we talk about universal health care from a lens of empathy? How do we talk about giving everybody a home from the lens of empathy? How do we talk about protecting workers' rights and the issues that all of us are running on, improving our schools? How do we think about that in terms of empathy? And just excited to have that conversation begin here.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you want to do is use this as an opportunity to figure out how we talk about the big public policy issues, the vexing challenges that we have through the lens of radical empathy.
That's correct. Yeah. The first thing on my mind is just thinking about one of the issues that came up earlier at a forum today. We were talking about the high unemployment rates, especially in the African American community, and I got cut off at my 1 minute just as I was about to talk about issues for people who've been injured on the job and no longer have the opportunity to do the work that they've been doing in the past, and how we just leave people behind with not enough training or economic resources to go forward.
Right. So if I hear you correctly, you were saying that at the last forum, unfortunately, you were cut off as you were about to get to your most critical point.
Right. And so that's something that happens at all these forums when the bell rings, and we just have to. But I think it was great to hear your empathizing with my comments just now.
And if I'm hearing you correctly, you think that I did a good job of listening.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I'll go to Rochelle. Oh wait, we'll go this way. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so the question is, how do we create a more empathetic culture? And I've done a lot of work in grassroots organizing. I actually learned from a guy named Marshall Gans, who teaches social movement organizing at Harvard. And there's a lot of similarities, I think, in what you're talking about here with what we put into practice in terms of organizing. And one of the things I learned a lot there was just the art of listening and making sure we're listening with intentionality. And I think about where I grew up in a very rural, very conservative, similar to you, upbringing. And my dad hunts and he drives a Chevy and he drinks Coors and he's like a dude, and and you look at him and you think he's a certain way, and then he's also like the biggest feminist I know, and I think we put these preconceived notions on people, but if we scratch beyond the surface a little bit, we actually can get much deeper and have a better understanding of who people are and what motivates them.
You talk awfully fast. But I believe that I heard you say that you got a lot of, you learned a lot about empathizing through your community organizing. And there was a man, was it Gann?
Marshall Gans.
Marshall Gans, and you learned a lot from that person. And that you grew up in a rural area where there were people like your dad who drove trucks and drank Coors, and people have preconceived ideas about him, but actually you have to take a deeper look at people because like your dad, he's actually a feminist.
Right, correct. And so I think the idea of listening to folks is really important. And one idea actually that I was talking to a friend about, this idea around our politics being broken right now and the lack of kind of dialogue that we have. And I had the idea of, when I was in 4th grade, I had a pen pal in Japan, and I learned a lot. We would write letters back and forth. And you see now there's these divides on urban versus rural and Democrat, Republican, and all these things. And I was like, why can't we, this might sound so trivial, but what if we had like a Penpal Program, people that have different beliefs and different ideologies, where we actually have really intentional conversations around what that means and what that looks like.
So when you were young, you had a pen pal from Japan, and you've thought to yourself, well, why can't we have that now in these places where we're divided, like Republican versus Democrat, and we could have these intentional conversations with each other and try to figure out where we're divided and how things can get better?
Right, and actually just sort of have like real meaningful dialogue about some of these issues. So I don't know, that's one idea. But the other, yes, so those are my ideas on, I have others as well, but those are my ideas on I think this very important issue around really trying to fix our broken politics in a lot of ways, and the idea around active listening.
Buffy thinks we need to fix our broken politics and really work on active listening.
I feel heard.
Good. So one of the things that...
You speak to Owen.
I'm to Owen, yes. Hi, Owen.
Hey.
So one of the things that really struck me in the video, and that I had been thinking about before, nurses, particularly my nurses union, we have been pushing back against technology. And I know that is, a lot of people don't like to hear that because a lot of people are just in love with technology, like my husband, he's in love with technology. He's an IT guy. But I'm afraid of what technology might be doing to our interconnectedness as human beings. And I wonder, particularly from that graph, as we become more and more reliant on things like social media for connecting with people, that we're losing our natural human connections.
So what I'm hearing you saying is that the nurses have been pushing back against the use of technology largely because it can get in the way of a human connection. And to extrapolate slightly, that's a big part of healing and of working with patients is having a one-on-one connection where people feel heard.
Yes, that's correct. For example, the other day I was at the hospital and I was taking care of a patient. And we have a lot of computerized charting to do now, which before we had paper charting. And one of the things that the computerized charting has set us up to do is I will oftentimes have to have my back towards my patient and my family for extended periods of time. And I remember eventually I just got up and went to another room so that I wouldn't have my back to the patients and the family while I was doing all that charting, because I felt very much like I was ignoring them, even though I was just doing my required work.
So in your work, you've had the experience of working with computerized charting, which maybe provides a lot of data, but takes you away from patients and from your family, and that feels wrong. And so you've taken steps to try to ameliorate that.
Right. So as we move forward with all of these technologies, yes, it is good that we have computerized technology, and no matter where you go in, they can look something up. But we have to realize that if you have a nurse that is there with you, the reason why they're there is to take care of you. And in order to take care of another human being, you need to connect with them both physically and emotionally.
So as a nurse, you need to connect with people physically and emotionally, and that's the most important thing. And the technology can obviously have some advantages, but it can also get in the way of that. And that's very important to you when you're doing your job and when you're living your life.
So in closing, I would just say that as we move forward and we constantly think that technology is always a good thing, that's always helping us, we should make sure that we don't lose our human connection, that we make sure to continue to look each other in the eye, that we continue to touch each other and be human.
Yeah. So yeah, as you're saying, as we move forward, even as technology is moving at a very rapid pace, we need to continue to have human connections, eye contact and human touch, because that's the most important thing.
Yes. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Let's see. Is this going to work? Okay. So yes, you can do Pranav. Am I pronouncing your Pranav?
Yeah, it's Pranav.
Okay. So just thinking about this process, and especially thinking about speaking to a Republican, which I'll admit I don't do a whole lot of in my day-to-day life, part of what that makes me think of is when I'm talking to someone who I disagree with, I have an instinct, and I think a lot of us do, to immediately start to mount a defense and think about, picking away at your argument or whatever it is, so that I can be right. And what I like about this empathic listening process is that it makes you first, before saying what you want to say, it makes you just make sure you're hearing the other person, which I think is often a step we tend to gloss over.
So I hear you saying that usually when you encounter someone you disagree with, like a Republican, for example, the first instinct that you have is really to just form a defense of your own arguments against theirs. And one good thing about this format is it kind of questions that whole process and turns it around.
Right, and I think part of why I feel comfortable even just saying that, it feels like I'm casting myself as a combative person, but I think that's the culture we live in now. Is we're a very hot take culture, that if you can say it in a way where it looks good on TV and you can like diss the other person, then you win. And if you show love and respect for that person, then it's like they won somehow, and that means you lost. And I think that's a hard thing to break, because hot takes are entertaining and they're fiery and they get you worked up, whereas this is a very interesting process, and don't know if it makes good TV and good entertainment.
So I hear you saying that we live in kind of a hot take culture where, you have to, beat your opponent, or, there's kind of a show aspect to it, and this is different from all of that because it's not very, I guess, like glamorous, or not very like, it doesn't get the headlines, but it's still very important.
Yeah, and where I struggle, where sort of I have a lot of unanswered questions, at least for myself, is around the fact that politics and a lot of policy is gamified. It's a contest with rules and a winner, and so is our culture just a reflection of the fact that how we make decisions comes down to a literal game?
So one of the questions that you have is whether politics is a reflection of our culture. It's gamified, and there's winners and losers, and is it a reflection of our culture? I guess that's one of the big questions you have, right?
Yes, thank you. I feel heard.
So it's your turn. You can select anyone to speak to as we haven't spoken to.
Okay. How about we go back to Andy? Buffy, you brought up the Penpal Program idea. Actually, it's interesting. Through Bridge USA, we actually had that idea where we would have kind of an exchange student program, where students from a university like Liberty University, for example, a very conservative university, would come to Berkeley and experience what that's like, and we would go to Liberty University. It never got off the ground, but we still are really interested in that. And I think that that's very relevant, especially in this day and age. I remember leading up to the 2016 election, I heard so many people say, I can't even get in the mind of a Trump supporter. Where are they even coming from? I could never even imagine someone coming to those conclusions, whereas previously, people would, at least look at Republicans and say, I kind of see where they're coming from. I might disagree, but there was a whole, change in this election.
So Pranav, you're thinking more in depth about what a Penpal program would look like, and your own reflections on when you talked about this with Bridge USA, and particularly partnering or pairing more liberal colleges and universities with conservative colleges and universities, and inspiring dialogue through that.
Yeah, and again, I think it's really relevant that we do that. Again, I said conversation and listening to their side is really this beautiful idea in theory, but when it comes to actually doing it, when it comes to the practice of it, I've seen that people can get really emotional because it's their entire belief system. It's almost like you're criticizing someone's religion, and their instinctual reaction, like Owen mentioned, is just to defend that and to have a strong guard against that, because if their belief system is kind of broken down, then they lose all sense of structure, and it becomes chaotic psychologically.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about how it's so important to have a program like this, because without that kind of dialogue and communication, that people are just not able to be in touch, and people are only surrounded by people of their own belief structure.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important that I think, talking about, higher education and academia, I think one of the big reasons why a lot of conservatives, are starting to, this will be my last idea, they're starting to distrust academia as a whole. It's pretty startling. I think 60% of conservatives don't think that higher education is beneficial anymore. I think that's really crazy. And we need to fix that, and it starts with building trust. I think that conservatives need to see themselves represented in things like higher education and things like, races, and other things. I think that we need to start building trust with the other side.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear that you feel like conservatives have lost trust in institutions, particularly higher education.
Yeah. Okay. So it's your turn. Select two. You can speak to whoever hasn't spoken.
Sure. Well, we've all spoken once, so.
That was the first round. Yes, we're going into round two, so we're going to go for three rounds in total. So.
Sure.
Same question.
Same question. Yeah, we're going to just keep exploring the topic.
Okay. Rochelle, I have it's funny that with this format, we are still, there isn't much, I don't get to hear your ideas directly back at me, but I'm thinking about healthcare themed issues, so I wanted to talk to you.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have to reflect? I don't know.
You wanted to talk to me about healthcare issues?
That's right. Yes. So, particularly, you were talking about an instance where you felt alienated from patients because of the use of technology in nursing. And I was thinking about when I'm working on fighting health insurance denials, whether they be through a PPO or a workers' compensation insurer, I'm often dealing with a process where the insurer is making life or death decisions, very important healthcare decisions, entirely on a paper record, and never gets to actually examine the patient, see the patient, do anything that would actually allow for that kind of human connection. And it's so frustrating to have that be our system.
So you can identify with what I was talking about earlier, because you oftentimes are in your line of business, which is law, right?
Right.
Right. Is to look or to fight against maybe an insurance company, and they're basing their interaction with a patient based on possibly a paper record.
That's right. Yeah, it reminded me of those situations, and that I think is just. It really leads to a lack of empathy in terms of the way that we get access to healthcare, which I think is important to have empathy when providers like nurses and doctors are working directly with patients and trying to deliver care that's necessary.
And you see, because of the system, that there is a lack of empathy because of the current system where they're not able to interact with the patients, and you don't believe that this system is working very well right now.
Yeah, I think that when we're able to allow doctors and nurses to work directly with patients and use their professional skills in conjunction with empathy and direct communication about what's ailing the patient, and we're able to get better results and get good access to care. But we often see a system of business-based decisions where only a paper record is what a higher-level bureaucrat within an insurance company is doing to deny access to care.
So you believe that we would have a better system where we could have better access when we're talking about actual patients if we could actually talk to human beings such as doctors and nurses, and not have simply a paper trail with bureaucracy that ultimately determines the course for these patients.
That's correct. Yeah, thanks for listening.
You're welcome.
So you can select, do you want to speak to same topic?
Okay. Buffy.
Great.
So how can we make empathy better? So one of the things I really want to do, as hopefully or maybe one of you guys, goes to the assembly, is one of the things I wrote in my blurb was, whoever goes there, that we really bring empathy to the seat, because I think that what we're so used to doing in all of these forums is talking and presenting ourselves and thinking of what we're going to say next. But really, as an assembly member, you do a lot of listening.
Right. So one of the things that you want to make sure happens is whoever wins, and you hope that hopefully it's you, goes to Sacramento and with intentionality, it sounds like, brings empathy to the seat, because at these forums, it's just these sort of 60-second sound bites.
Right. And another thing that I'm interested in is bringing a different type of assembly member, someone who really cares about people, someone that doesn't care about their career more than they care about getting the seat or moving to the next stage. I think that what I think is the most important, or the best way that we could have an assembly member representing us, is if they really care about representing the people and listening to the people and bringing the people's voice to Sacramento more than anything else.
Right. So it sounds like what you're saying is you think the most important thing that this person can have is that they care fundamentally about people, less about their career or what they're going to do next.
Correct. So I'd be curious to see like what we could do in terms of your idea of actually bringing an empathy circle. They would say, wow, you must be the representative for Berkeley, I think. But, maybe we really could bring an empathy circle at least to one of the caucuses or something and really work on our listening skills and our connecting skills and our human relations skills with one another as assembly members.
Yeah, so you'd be curious to see if we can bring some of the stuff that these fine folks have presented with us today to Sacramento and how we could actually do that, what that could actually look like.
Yes.
Yeah.
And let's see. Gosh, I feel like I said what I needed to say. Thank you.
You feel like you've been heard, it sounds like. Yes, okay. I'll go with Owen. So just a couple other thoughts on this topic of how do we create empathy. And a lot of this, like I said, does come from my learnings as a community organizer. But as you all know, I do a lot of house parties. And I had my 109th house party this morning. And what I do at all those house parties is at the very beginning, I go around the room to everyone in the room and ask them, their name, where they're from, but also the top issue or two that they care about. Because I think it's really important for whoever gets this seat, and I hope it's me, no offense, Rochelle, that we do that asking with that intentionality to understand where people are coming from and the issues that they care about. And I've pledged that if I do win the race, I want to continue to have house parties throughout, even as a legislator, so that I can stay connected to the community, kind of to your point, right? And keep it a very sort of people-centric effort.
So you love the house parties. And, and at those house parties, you
109, Owen.
109, I'm aware. But, it's an ongoing count.
Yeah.
So at your 109 house parties, you always go around the room, get people's names and their top two issues. And that's because you want to know where people are coming from, where they're at. And you want to continue doing that as a legislator so you can stay connected, stay grounded to people's concerns.
Yep. The other thing is, in my day job at Common Sense Media, we do a lot of work on tech addiction, and kind of to your point, Rochelle, earlier about technology. And there's a lot of research and findings that are showing the impact of social media and smartphones and devices on kids as they grow up, and the negative implications of what that means, including even there are studies that show that even when parents have their phone, even if it's turned upside down on the dinner table with the kid feels neglected and feels like the parent is focused on the phone, and it actually impacts the relationship with the kid and the parent. And so we argue for a device-free dinner, which sounds like that should be a simple thing, but if you've tried to get rid of your devices at dinner, it's actually kind of hard, and like literally put them in another room. And so I think these types of things are also things that we should think about with intentionality of being mindful of technology and how it's invasive in your human-to-human connection with people, and creating very specific moments of time where we're actually physically not even physically around our devices. And obviously in the context of being a parent, I try to do that now. I fail at it a lot, but I keep trying. But I think that's another idea of something that we can do to help foster that human-to-human connection.
Yeah, so in your work at Common Sense Media, you've studied technology addiction, and you found that even just a phone face down at dinner time can make the other person feel neglected. And that's, an honest struggle for a lot of people to actually put away their devices, even have them in a different room so that they can have an actual honest connection, with no distractions.
Yep. Thank you. I feel heard, Owen.
Thank you. All right, so I guess I'm going to Andy then.
No, he already spoke.
Oh.
So I think it's me or...
Oh, okay. Well, I've already spoken to everyone else except you and Andy, so...
Oh.
You haven't spoken to me, right?
Oh, right, yeah, I listened to you.
Oh, we need to go
Yeah.
each person for each round. So the second round, it was, I think, for me. You keeping track?
It's really who hasn't been a listener yet in this round.
Okay,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
Oh, I've got a mic here, so...
So, yeah, I guess I want to first kind of pick up on what Buffy was just talking about, because it's in my mind right now. Yesterday, posted an event saying, don't do Facebook today. It was a Facebook event. And so just inspired by that, I did not go on Facebook all day. I had nothing pressing. And there were a couple times when I sort of felt my thumb moving toward that button, and I stopped myself. And I honestly felt better. And today I did open my Facebook app today, and I could feel some negative emotions just around doing that. And I think social media by and large makes us less happy. And it's such a powerful organizing tool, and it's not going away anytime soon. But I think it's something that I've gotten through my head a little bit recently, and I think it's helping me live a slightly better, more human connected life right now.
Okay, so you did a test about not being on Facebook. Somebody recommended that, and you're finding yourself kind of drawn to kind of the addiction of doing Facebook, but you didn't do it, and you're really seeing that really felt good, not to be on technology all the time.
Yeah, and I sort of want to jump topics entirely now. Sort of getting back to what I mentioned earlier about how politics is gamified, and that creates certain incentives, and creates the desire and the incentive to be a winner, especially in a public forum, in anything public where you might be swaying minds of voters, to have you be the winner and you to rise above your competition. And thinking about bringing this to the assembly or to formats like that, I think this could help increase camaraderie. You hear a lot of legislators in Washington talking about how there used to be camaraderie and it's basically gone now. At the same time, there are these forces that are, that can still, your votes and your ultimate loyalties tend to be responding to something that's sometimes bigger than your relationships within the Capitol. And so I think this can help, but I think it's only one piece.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're seeing sort of a win-lose dynamic in the culture, and trying to get one-upsmanship over each other, and that really getting away from that where there's real connection, real camaraderie, kind of a feeling of connection and camaraderie created, that this could be one piece to it. There's going to need to be a lot more to this building a culture of empathy. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I feel heard.
So I lost track. Did you twice or?
Yeah, I've gone twice.
Okay, then I'll speak to Rochelle. Yeah, I'm pissed off with the Democrats. So Barack Obama ran on a campaign of empathy. He said, empathy is important. You saw that it was central to his campaign. And then when he was in office, he said, I'm going to choose a Supreme Court justice that has empathy as one of the qualities, just one of the qualities, and the Republicans went crazy. They just, Fox News for 2 weeks just harangued and just kind of attacked that, and Democrats didn't do anything. They did not know how to talk about empathy and kind of respond to the criticisms that were there.
So you're pissed off at the Democrats.
Yeah.
When Barack Obama ran, he ran, as we saw, with empathy as part of his platform, what he wanted to incorporate into politics. And then when he went and decided he was going to put into the Supreme Court a judge that was empathetic, the Republicans came after him, and the Democrats basically did not enough to defend empathy. And you'd like to see them now, I suppose, do more.
Yeah, to learn more about it and be able to articulate and respond, because Jeff Sessions on the Judiciary Committee, he just went on and on. It was a whole discussion about empathy in the Senate, which you don't hear much about. Jeff Sessions going on and on about how horrible it was. And Democrats just said just about nothing. There was no response. It's like they didn't know how to respond. They didn't know how to create an argument in response.
Right. So Jeff Sessions was arguing against empathy. And so the Democrats, I'm sorry, I'm just processing this a little bit. Like, I want to respond to it. I'm like, So the Democrats basically sat there and did not come up with a response to defend empathy and basically let Jeff Sessions have his way at that time.
Yeah, it was a whole discussion in the Senate, and Fox News for 2 weeks was out there criticizing, and nothing from the Democrats. So I think, and I think they could have had a response, and they could have clarified empathy, and I think Republicans would have been on board if they would have understood what it really meant.
So Fox News went on and on criticizing empathy, and the Democrats continued to not do anything. They didn't seem to have a response to articulate, and you think that they definitely could have done a better job and should in the future.
Yeah, and they could have bridged between Republicans and Democrats, yeah.
Yeah, and then they could have possibly had the Republicans come on board if they could have articulated themselves
That's it.
better.
Thank you, Raquel heard.
Okay, so we're entering the third round now. Everybody's spoken twice, so we have one more round. So of course, Rochelle, you can pick
Okay.
wherever you want.
Okay.
To have you listen.
I'll start with you again, Edwin. Okay, so something you said earlier really struck a chord with me because I was raised in Fresno, California, and I am African American, but I was raised by my Caucasian grandparents, and they are white, Christian, conservative Republicans. And so when I go home for Thanksgiving and Christmas and everything, we don't have an empathy circle, but sometimes I do speak. I am the lone one that will speak with my uncle, who is an Italian American, a business owner, and so he's very much into kind of your Fox News type of Republicanism, and I do engage them.
So you come from a conservative family and environment, and that you do engage your conservative family and are able to talk with them.
Yes. The rest of the family stays out, and eventually it's me and my uncle outside, and everyone else kind of runs away. But I remember speaking with my cousin, who is my uncle's son in particular, and I remember him saying that the Democrats always make him feel bad about himself because he is a white male and he feels like the Democrats are constantly making him feel like he is the cause of all evil.
So when you listen to your uncle, is it your uncle?
My cousin.
Your cousin. He's saying that the Democrats make him feel bad because he's a white male and he probably doesn't like it.
Right. And he said he also likes the way that Republicans speak to him and his, I guess, about him with kind of America first and pride and kind of boosting his ego, boosting who he is as a person, making him feel proud of where he is and where he's come from and where we're going. Whereas he feels like the Democrats are constantly negative.
So your cousin is sharing with you that he feels that the Democrats are making him feel negative about himself, and the Republicans are kind of making him feel proud about the country and the country first, and
Right.
giving a really positive message that he can resonate with.
So while I feel like I moved here to be in this Berkeley bubble. I love it here. I love the progressivism. I'm very happy that I can go home to Fresno and talk to people that have a different opinion, because I think that when you're constantly surrounded by people that agree with you, sometimes you can miss something that's very big.
So getting out of the Berkeley bubble and connecting with these other people is really important to you. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so I will speak to Buffy. I was feeling pretty passionate about the Republicans, about the Democrats, because I really feel that because I see it in my own family, that when we do these empathy circles and conservatives understand what empathy really is, that they really resonate with it. They value being heard, they're willing to listen, and when we do it mutually, that it really is, sort of bipartisan,
Right. So what you're saying is you see people respond positively to this regardless of their political ideology.
Yeah,
party.
Everybody wants to feel heard, everyone wants to feel acknowledged, and when we do that with each other, kind of mutually, it's a positive thing.
Right. It's a positive thing when we do these things.
Yeah, and I feel heard.
Okay.
Every time.
Great. Why don't I go with Owen? I guess just the last point, as I've been sort of thinking through how we can actually create more empathy is, and this goes back to some of the learnings that I've had working with Marshall Gans. He taught me this concept of story of self. And basically what that means is you're trying to express your political beliefs through your own story, which is really just expressing your values. And it takes away some of the heat of the conversation and allows you to talk about your political viewpoint through storytelling and through your own personal experiences.
So you've learned from Marshall Gans about story of self and how that can kind of reduce the heat around political views because it comes from a story, it comes from a human narrative.
Yeah, and one of the things we learn in Story of Self is, and when he worked with me on my story, he kept asking the question of why. Well, why do you think that? Well, and he kept going sort of deeper and deeper and deeper until you realize that your political ideology is very much comes from, in a lot of ways, your own personal experiences. And by figuring out a way to articulate your political views through personal experience, that allows other people to empathize with you. And that's actually one of the most powerful components of Story of Self, is the idea of empathy.
Right. So you found and you've learned through Story of Self that by putting your political perspective in terms of a story, in terms of a personal narrative, it evokes empathy in someone, and that's kind of the most powerful part of it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And using this concept, I use it now all the time when I'm meeting with folks. I always want to know why keep asking a little bit more deeply as to why someone thinks what they do, and also if rounding that out with where are you from and how did you grow up and what is your background. And I think when we have a broader painted picture of who people are in terms of their personal experiences, it's much easier than to empathize with why they make those decisions that they make or why they think the things that they think. And so for me, I hope any one of us, whoever wins this campaign and goes to Sacramento, I think with other legislators and whoever we encounter, it's having a better understanding of what personally motivates those people and what their personal background is, I think will help make us all better leaders.
So you've found through your own experience, and you hope that whoever wins this can kind of take that idea with them to Sacramento, that personal experiences kind of make people who they are, and that you can understand someone through their experiences instead of just a set of political beliefs.
Yes, thank you. I feel heard.
I guess I'll go to Andy. And I'm not sure what I'm going to say here. I guess I think a lot about how politics and culture, I guess, using culture as kind of a broad term for what we're talking about here, in terms of creating more empathetic culture. How these two interact, and where politics and policy should have a role, and where it's best to just kind of make sure we have a fair system and not try to be too hands-on about what sort of culture that's supposed to create.
So you're wondering if, I may say, even the balance between having a system where we have politics and policy versus fairness in the system.
Right, and I feel like these sorts of events and this kind of practice can make us idealistic about what's possible, and how we can change the culture in Sacramento and California, the world. At the same time, I feel like there's so much to be done on the policy level, which is where the representative is will be doing the most work to just make sure that people are treated the same. And I feel like so many people rightfully don't feel like that's actually happening from both the state and the federal level, where we're both on through our laws and through our benefit systems that we're not that we're privileging some people over others, and often that falls along racial lines.
Mm-hmm. You're feeling in the in the big picture, that we are talking in very idealistic ways, I believe through this campaign, but also that when thinking ahead, that the next assembly member from this district is going to be, it's going to be important for that person to be looking at the equity for all people in California, and you're concerned about inequities, particularly along the racial lines.
Right. And yeah, so I feel like in terms of how one, acts as a legislator, I feel like there's a lot that can be learned from something like an empathy circle, and just in connecting people, making sure that you're working with people. But as a policymaker, I think, you can be empathic kind of in a different way, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So you're thinking about the different ways that people can be empathic and empathetic.
I feel heard.
Pranav, so I'm thinking about the ways that, and I only because you happen to be our Republican in the race, and so I want to hope that it's okay to talk directly to you as a person, but I'm thinking about issues that are very partisan, the divides across this country, and that it's very concerning to me and frustrating to have those debates at a national level.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is that it's I'm going to try my best. I don't know exactly what you're saying, but were you saying that it's hard to have debates about certain issues on a national level? That issues that in your mind we should already be at a certain place on?
That's right. One that I was thinking about in particular is the issue of climate change and climate protection, and that's one where we see I think a lot of people who happen to be registered Republicans do accept the science of climate change, and I wonder what is the gap of appreciating the intergenerational aspects of what's going to happen in the future if we continue to pollute our climate, and what's going to happen to people both in this country as well as for future generations and people from other countries if we don't do something about it in the very near future to be able to protect our climate and our communities.
So what you're saying is that most registered Republicans actually do believe in the science behind climate change, but may not necessarily act in a way that is beneficial still, where there's kind of an intergenerational gap when people don't truly understand what's going to happen to our nation and to other nations.
It's very upsetting to me. Yes, that's correct. It's very upsetting to me that the leadership from the president and the congressional leadership, especially, reject the climate science, and I know that that's out of step with the public in terms of what not as much as registered Democrats, but I know that a majority of registered Republicans do believe that the science and accept the science, but we have a gap in understanding, and I wonder how much empathy could improve the way we communicate about these devastating impacts to come.
Definitely.
Just reflect back last.
Oh yeah, sorry. So you're saying that kind of there needs to be a gap that's bridged where people start to understand the effects of climate change, especially intergenerationally. Yeah, I think that's what you're saying, right?
That's right. Thanks. I feel heard.
So how are we? I think you're the last person, right, to speak now.
Yeah.
So you'll speak to whoever you want to speak to.
Andy, is that fine?
No, you can anybody.
Okay, anybody besides Andy?
You can.
I'd actually like to talk about this issue more.
Okay, sure.
So this is actually really a perfect issue, to talk about. For me personally, I've been working within the Republican Party, for the acceptance of climate science and, especially action on certain policies. Catherine Baker is, an example of a Republican who I deeply respect, and we're, trying to help her as much as we can within the party. When she went against the whole Republican Party, that was a very costly political move for her when she supported cap and trade, and many people within the party were quick to be very antagonistic towards that. I remember at the CRP conference, we worked really hard to not have a statement passed that would directly condemn these specific people who voted on cap and trade. I think I have a lot of optimism going forward. The next generation of young Republicans are actually very active on this issue, and we actually have a climate conference coming up for Bridge USA. Talk about differing perspectives on climate change between the right and the left. Sorry, that was a lot.
So I hear you reflecting on the work that you've done within the Republican Party to raise the issues of climate change and the struggles that it was just to get the party to not condemn an assembly member who went with the majority, the Democratic majority package on cap and trade.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that we need to really reimagine the whole political system. I think that both parties are quick to focus on issues where they have the least common ground on, abortion, immigration, gun control, the hot button issues. But I think that policymakers should really focus on the issues that they have the most common ground on, especially, and then work down from there. I think, for example, there's a lot of common ground on criminal justice reform, a lot of common ground on things like cap and trade, and a carbon tax, for example. A lot of common ground on education reform. And I think that our elected officials should work directly on those rather than focusing on partisan bickering. And I think that's key. And I think the seat itself should belong to someone who's willing to do that. Every political seat, in my opinion. I guess my last point is that, I think it was Rochelle who talked about this, when you went to Fresno and you're actively trying to expose yourself to new points of view. And I mentioned this earlier, but I kind of want to expand on it. I was actually a liberal in high school, very, very liberal actually, and
Gotta wrap up.
Yeah, sorry. It was during that time where I started to watch a lot of Fox News, even though I disagree with it so heavily, and I read, a lot of conservative thinkers like Edwin Burke. And now, when I've started to believe in stuff, like strong national defense, I read liberal, authors and stuff.
Just the essence.
Yeah, the essence was that you feel like that elected officials should start with areas where there is common ground, and you have a few ideas where those could be found.
Okay, great. So that everybody's spoken this last program. So we did that. So I want to thank our panel. So we're going to get up, and the next panel is going to get up to
Yeah, I think